Hello and welcome to Femtech Next, a spotlight on women's health and what really will change the way we approach it across the world, but more importantly in India, where we're struggling with a large number of really scary statistics. Whether it comes to women's health at the workforce, women's health in general, certainly early detection, and any efforts that we could potentially make to ensure that women are truly taking charge of their health by using technology as well. Is the gap in media coverage and reporting? Are we not talking about it accurately enough? Are we still shy and there's more stigma and taboo around some of the subjects? All of that is very much so in focus today as we put the spotlight on how journalism, women's health, and coverage are so deeply interlinked. Perhaps we need to change the way we think about what we say and how about women and their bodies. I've got a very special panel that's joining us. Got Shailja Mittal of QREX. I've got Navneet Kaur. She's from Femtech India. And I've got Dr. Brittany Barretto from Fem Health Insights. And I'm delighted to have this entire session really putting some deep and intuitive spotlight onto what we are sort of going through around us when it comes to insights on women's health. So maybe I'll straight come to you, Brittany. What is it that is the big gap in making women's health more commonplace in the press?
Thank you for that question. And thank you for inviting me to be on this awesome panel. You know, I think that we have finally figured out that we cannot just continue to censor women's bodies because it actually hurts our health. The more when we don't talk about women's health, women feel isolated in their own experiences. Instead of letting them know that if they have endometriosis, that's very common. 1 in 10 women have endometriosis. Or if they're struggling with menopause symptoms, that could last up to 7 years. Many women do not know the extent to which their conditions or symptoms can be experienced. And I think media has a huge part in that, portraying women on commercials or movies or in TV as if these are funny scenarios or short-lived or not that serious. And so media has a huge role in women feeling that they're not alone in their experience and that these are normal female health experiences.
Indeed, and I'd like to bring, Navneet into this conversation. And Navneet, here in India, there is so much taboo and stigma around women's health, and we just don't seem to find a way to talk about anything that goes beyond, I guess, pregnancy and maternity, or at best, we'll now talk periods, which of course has been last few years. What do you think is sort of holding us back, and why?
Thank you so much for having me for such a great panel discussion today. I feel there's a lot of lack of awareness and education that women are not really aware of. The media is all about putting very spicy, crispy stories out there, which turns out like a more dramatic way. Rather, they should have focused on more of women's health related issues that where real women can relate to that. And I think that way, they can really sort of empower the industry, that also having real advocates, maybe some professional expert advice that which really relates to women health concerns, and that we have some resources from the expert that which relates to women's health. And those can really be empower and really sort of empower the space women's health and femtech overall.
I think there's some important points there. Shailja, to bring you in, I mean, clearly this isn't women's health is a very large bucket of conversations from reproductive to menstrual to menopause and, of course, sexual health. There has been a little bit of, quite a bit of absence of having these conversations in the press. And I make the distinction, it's one thing for society to talk about, but it's quite another for it to be normalized in coverage. And sometimes one reflects the other, perhaps. You are on mute.
I'm so sorry. Yes. Sorry. Thank you, Shaili, first of all, for inviting me on this stage, because it's very important now, finally, to talk about women's health and all the perspectives around women's health. You very rightly mentioned that, we've been talking only just women's health regarding their health concerns, which we generally see. And now we have started talking about periods. But because of being in the sexual health space, so I can very specifically mention that sexual health is still a taboo, and especially around women. I mean, statistics tell that 80% of women actually haven't experienced orgasms, or they don't experience orgasm, but nobody talks about it. We do talk about that, okay, men do not ejaculate or they have a problem because fertility is connected to that. But nobody is actually taking care that, okay, orgasm is important for pleasure also, which, and pleasure is deeply connected to women's mental health, because when they're not having pleasure out of the relationship, the pleasure, the happy hormones which are ejaculated during the orgasm, when they are not ejaculated, when the bonding is not that strong in the relationship, their mental health is getting affected. So all these things we are not realizing that they are all interlinked. And that is why we are thinking, okay, women health is only concerned till the time when it is seen that, okay, the thyroid level is okay, sugar level is okay, their
Yeah.
organs should be okay. But their mental health, which is so much related to the relationships they are in, so much related to so many things they are, I mean, going through in their lives, that is completely ignored, which I feel.
Yeah. So, Brittany, I want to bring you in here and sort of reflect on the fact that it's not just generically having conversations. Now it's time for very specific, work, specific insights, specific data. And finally, women are at least starting a conversations, certainly in the more developed pockets of the world, on the need for women to be part of research, part of outcomes. How are you looking at all of that as a part of your platform?
Well, back in the day, we used to think that female hormones were going to mess up our experiments as scientists. We thought that they were going to convolute the data, make science harder. And at the end of the day, scientists are good people who want to do good work and they want to produce solutions for humans. And so I can respect that, back in the 1950s and 60s, we didn't quite understand the female hormone cycle. And so that may have, disrupted our results. We now live in a world of chat GPT, flying drones on Mars, and landing rockets on ships, right? So we can totally accommodate the estrogen fluctuations of a female throughout the month in our experiments. And I'm very excited to see, I'm in the United States. We have new laws that are passing around having animal models that actually have female animal models, because things like endometriosis have been cured twice in animal models. And as soon as they went to human trials, they failed because the animal models were male. And when the backdrop to scientific discovery is male paradigm, we are doing a disjustice to women, real human women. And so I think that it's kind of similar to media. We've assumed this is just how it has always been. Even me as a scientist, I was trained. I'd never asked what was the sex of the cell lines I used in my basic scientific research until I have my current job. And I'm like, oh my goodness, you're right. I never asked were my cell lines female or male, and how was that potentially affecting my experiment. I think that publicists and media today, they're not anti-women or anti-women's health, but I do think that there's a precedent, essentially a tradition of what you do talk about and what you don't talk about, similar to what you research and what you don't research. And so I really do think that panels like this are where we start. We start to ask people, hey, open your eyes, ask, was sex considered in this experiment? Whereas women's health considered in this media, or are we perpetuating our paradigms that were from the 1950s?
I think those are some good points there. Quick reactions from you, Navneet, and then I'll go over to Shailja.
Yeah, I think it's also recognized that they consider that there is a unique experience, right? They're from every woman go through different age groups, like for mothers and Z's, non-binary individuals, right? So providing that targeted help can really ensure that everyone feels seen, heard, and that have access to resources and support they need, right? And there's also, if you look at it, like in India, the government is also playing a really great role in terms of bringing great initiative, looking at telemanas, right, for example, which is a mental health platform that also really empowers, and it provides the services all over the country around the clock, particularly that areas, the people remote and underserved areas, right? And then we have different segments as looking at the women health's main focus has always always been in healthcare in India, which we will look at diabetes and other healthcare sectors, right? So as I see that as a femtech and overall space is really bringing bridging the gap for all these challenges.
Indeed. Shailja, I think there's definitely some concerted effort that may be around, but fundamentally, how do we get these conversations, for example, to be commonplace, not just in panels like these, where many of us are converted to this notion and are on a mission to change things, but trigger these conversations in workplaces, at restaurants, at salons, where women don't judge each other. Forget about men being a part of this conversation at this point. I'm saying women are judging each other for having these conversations. How much of this is going to be cultural, and how much of this could actually change with just normalizing conversations?
So I think talking about very basic, this starts from a very basic age. I mean, first I talk about that. First, we need to, as you rightly said, that women start judging each other, like women start judging the other women. So I think this needs to be first cleared off from a very tender age, and that is how I would like to bring in that Cinderella complex. I don't know if you're all aware of that. We from the very tender age, it's in our cultural society till now, we've been telling women that, okay, you need to be protected by men. You need to be protected. You need somebody to protect you. And that is where, I mean, we've seen the Disney movies also. In the Disney movies also, there have been Rapunzels that, okay, you need to be pretty and a prince will come and take you away. This is changing now. We've seen movies around, hardly we used to see movies around women. Now we see movies which are focused on women. So I think world is changing. I think world is coming out and understanding that, okay, women can also have their choices. Women can also talk about their own health. Women can also talk about their empowerment. And that is where women are supporting. Otherwise, I would think that movies which are focused on women, like Queen or other movies, would not have done so well if we wouldn't
Yeah.
have been supporting. So world is changing. Of course, every change takes its own time. World is changing towards good. Women are now coming out and supporting each other. I have seen that we've had conferences where women are talking about sexual health and they're openly putting their questions that, I have this problem, how to get this solved. They're not now, most of them are not they're not shy that somebody is going to judge me in my sexual health or in any aspect of my life
Yeah.
apart. So I think world is changing. That's what I would say.
So I'm actually inclined to kind of go with your optimism, but I also feel like this is always the case when we're two steps ahead and one step behind, particularly on women's health, because I constantly feel, I mean, for example, United States is a great example on abortion rights, right? I mean, who would have thought in 2022 the world would actually just reverse in take such a huge step back? So Brittany, maybe you want to kind of reflect on, there is a sense of a movement, right? But there's great amount of resistance, and that resistance is coming from many other quarters. So curious about your thoughts.
Well, optimistically, it is a small group of people in the United States that are anti-abortion and also anti-talking about things like periods. Florida actually just passed a bill that you are not allowed to talk about menstruation until 6th grade, which is about 13 years old. That is insane that we are not allowed to talk about periods until girls are 13, 14 years old. That's usually after they've already gotten their period. So absolutely insane. But again, the optimistic person in me is that it is, in fact, a very small group, a very loud group, a very active group, but it is a minority of Americans that don't want abortion, don't want to talk about periods. And so it really is just a matter of getting to our voices together so that they are as loud as these folks are in terms of what, the suppression they want to put on women. And so I'm optimistic that this is kind of their kind of last cry before they become too diluted, because the next generation, Gen Z, They are so forward thinking about what is gender, what is sex, how do I identify, what is, what am I allowed to talk about, what am I not allowed to talk about. And when we have things like TikTok with, hashtags like hashtag PCOS with over 4 billion views, all of a sudden you start to see technology allows us to dismiss any shame, get rid of paradigms of what we think things are. And so although I'm disappointed in my current country right now, I am hopeful for the future.
Right. So, Brittany, just to build on that, one of the reasons the world always tries to pick up something and leave something else behind is money, potential, market, size, And we're seeing that suddenly femtech is being talked about. It just seems pretty late to the party that they wake up to the rest of the half population suddenly and they expect that, wow, finally it's a market. And many of us have been crying hoarse about this for years in different ways. What do you see specifically in the potential of innovation, tech around femtech that would lead to perhaps the next decade or so being focused on this part?
So what we've seen is the rise of femtech actually correlates to the rise of women in STEM. So the more scientists, researchers, engineers, and doctors that are women, the more solutions you have targeting women's health. So that is one of the trends we see. The second trend is women in finance, because at your earliest stage, you need someone to believe in your idea without any traction or revenue. And it's usually female angel investors that are taking the bet on these startups. So women in finance. And then third, but not least, is women in the workforce. 47% of the US workforce is now female. And when your employees aren't feeling well or taking time off because of their period-induced migraines every month, you start to think about what benefits or opportunities can an employer provide that actually increases their bottom line by improving the health of their female employees. And so with these three trends, we see the rise of femtech. In the last 10 years, we've seen a 700% increase in the number of femtech companies formed. My company has the largest database of femtech startups. We have over 1,800 femtech startups in our database, and many of them were formed in the last 6 to 10 years, if not last 2 years. So we see this huge uplifting of innovation. And I think in terms of the topic of this panel, in terms of media, 2 years ago, people were still telling me that, femtech will get attention once they have an exit. And I thought, we have 6 unicorns. What do you mean have an exit? We've had, not only have we had over 130 exits, which my company tracks, we've had 6 unicorns, over $1 billion in valuation. And so I do actually think it's a media problem, not just for consumers and commercials, but also in TechCrunch and CB Insights and PitchBook. Why are they not publishing of all the exits that are happening?
More than that, I think the bros just need to come up to speed on what's going on around the world, right? I think that's a very important factor. And perhaps, Navneet, you can reflect on that. That it's not just good enough to want to have that coverage or talk about it, but how many journalists are, for example, understanding what femtech really is? How is it changing? How much of an understanding do they have about women's bodies before they go and report on companies and what they do? A case, an example. A startup in India caught the attention of women, and rightly so, for launching some inner thigh whitening roll or something like that. And women are asking, I don't need this stuff. Who's building for women? And why are these guys thinking that this is a market? So fundamentally, we have lack of knowledge here.
No, absolutely. And I also feel that, there has to be a right dialogue that about women's health, and media plays a major role in that. As I just mentioned earlier, there has to be resources from experts or someone who comes from healthcare background that, those data is lacking. There has to be scientifically report has to be released that women can relate to that. And, also like talking about, women reproductive rights also, right? That as we know, we have a better right than any other country, and I'm so proud to say that, because India is so much into women empowerment, and where it's heading, it's so great. But also, if you look at recent research also, that the women were interviewed and they are not aware of their reproductive rights, and that also because of lack of knowledge and lack of awareness. I think we need more right dialogue and more people coming together to talking about it, because if women know about their rights, they are more confident about it, right? So I think I'm so glad that there are platform, not just in India, like globally, all these femtech platforms who empowering women's health, and we all of us really collaborating and really talking about what's happening country wise, because we feel in India, because it's always been, oh, Asia is very stigmatized market because of culture aspects, right? We are very diverse and all, but I don't think it's just Asia, that it's lacking in different part of the world, like
Well,
different cities, right? So that way we more relatable, that such conversations need to come, that we all feel that it is the same thing. End of the day, we all working on same one goal, making women's health better, bringing more awareness. And I think that needs like of course femtech is growing. It is amazing to see what India has done in last 2 years, and very proud to say that we have very passionate founders who are building great solution for women and empowering overall ecosystem. But I think it still need lack of awareness, something is really lacking, and right
yeah.
dialogue and how media put it across, that also plays a very major role, because that's the influence to the Gen Z, right? End of the day, we are building brands for Gen Z's, the new generation, right? So that has to be relatable, that
It has to be relatable. I think that
yeah.
is the point. I mean, we at She the People saw 200 million video views on women's health content created by doctors in a matter of 12 months. And we asked
Yeah.
ourselves, it was literally like a shocker. I'm like, is that really the gap? Right? Because women are asking them, who's telling us? The other thing I think perhaps, Shailja, you could also reflect on this. Women's health always remains on crossroads with culture, right? And it's deeply connected. I mean, the challenges Indian women and, let's say, American, Australian ones have might broadly be the same, but how they're received, perceived, and shared can be completely different. So some thoughts there. I mean, sexual health perhaps much harder.
Huh, that's true. So I would say in India, yes, because the culture has been very different, and women have been, if not, I mean, India, Pakistan, India, or Southeastern Asian countries, women have been behind parda. This had been a culture. I mean, we have come a long way, but yes, we still have to go a long way. So if I compare the country, India or Southeast Asian companies with the other countries like USA and European countries, of course, culture is a big barrier in for women to come out and talk openly about their health and sexual health, of course. But again, I would say that very important point, which just Navneet made, that yes, awareness is very important, and the right kind of awareness. There have been influencers, there have been right influencers, there have been wrong influencers also, which actually are giving knowledge just for entertainment. So that is somewhere we need to actually draw a line, that the awareness is being put in the right way and the right kind of awareness, so that I mean, at least especially related to health, women health, the right kind of awareness is very important, even to break those cultural barriers, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, quick response to that, Brittany, at your end. I mean,
Well, something we struggle with in the United States is that a lot of people actually categorize childcare as femtech. So if you look on PitchBook or Crunchbase, or even this new company called Femtech Analytics, they recently published a graph that said the 5 top funded femtech companies, and one of them was baby formula, and one of them was the Owlet, which is a heart monitor for your baby, as if women's health depends on her baby eating and being monitored. Women's health does not depend on that. The baby's health does. And it is not just the woman's responsibility to make sure the baby is fed and is sleeping through the night well. It is the parents, it is the guardians, it is whoever, right? And so when we start to categorize things as women's health that are babysitter apps, we really start to convolute, oh, wait, what is the role of the woman and what is the woman's health? One statistic we hear a lot is women make 80% of the healthcare decisions. That's why we need femtech. I think we actually have a data interpretation problem there. Women making 80% of the healthcare decisions mean that women are overburdened with the decisions of her family. That's not necessarily decisions for her own body. And so if we're able to actually unburden women with the responsibility of caretaking for children and parents, she may even be able to caretake herself even better.
That is a very good point. I never thought about that. I mean, we do put women's health in multiple buckets that really don't have the focus on women. I mean, honestly, I think for the lack of anything that we've done, and by the way, in this case, I really sometimes think whether it's the government, whether it's the hospital network, whether it's just the health system. I mean, female health equals maternity, and after that it's pediatric.
Yeah.
So I think we just don't seem to have a thing that women have to do anything for themselves. They're just sort of walking wombs. And therefore that takes me to the point of how will mindsets change, right? And what is it that we can talk about as women, and other people who are working in women's health? It's one thing to see startups succeed, but it's quite another to see that, it's changing the culture. So I just want to sort of run through this room on that aspect. Shailja, first to you.
Sorry, Shaili, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, just understanding how, it's going to be hard to shift this culture very, very quickly because, somebody was mentioning here that Gen Z is asking for very specific needs. They are gender fluid. They're still figuring out what they identify as. But here we have systems that run that say motherhood, maternity equals women's health.
That's true. And I mean, exactly. So we call right now, till now, the definition of a femtech or a women's health startup or a women's health company was maternity care, how to have a good maternity period, how to have a healthy baby, and post baby care. So whereas actually women phases of life are being ignored till now, which is like puberty, then womanhood, then menopause stage, and post-menopause stage. All these stages have different kinds of struggles, which that is true, is till now, if they're completely ignored, that women have these four phases and they have their own mental and physical struggles in all these four phases differently, other than the child care. I mean, right now, as you said, rightly said, Gen Z is moving. Gen Z would not actually relate women health to child. A lot of them even say that we don't want children. We don't want children. We might not have children we might adopt. We might not give birth to children. That is also another phase.
Even if I do want to have kids, I just don't necessarily want to keep going to a pregnancy clinic for everything throughout my life. I just need a place which doesn't kind of look at me as my identity being that of a mother. I mean, that works for me actually, honestly, with content. I just abandon mom-centric websites because I'm like, I'm not just a mom. Give me a break.
Exactly. Right? And that is changing very fast. I mean, I see teenagers, like, because I have a teenager at my home, I see teenagers talking about that. Okay, I mean, okay, they do ask questions. What is egg freezing? Why do we need to be pregnant around 30 years of age? Why can't, women just freeze their eggs and they want concentrate on their career and they want to have, when they have children, when they want to have children. So this is a kind of culture which is popping up and which is going to be very fast. I think women, and I'm being optimistic again here, that I think now this is the time when women health will take a front seat. Mm-hmm. And these all, when we are talking about women health, we have a big field to play and big field to serve actually.
That's also true. I'm actually going to just make this one point, which I struggle with often, is that we go on saying this to women that they are fertile from early 20s. And then it just goes on and on. I mean, like, I'm a living example of a woman who had a first child at 35 and my sister-in-law had a 41. I'm like, we didn't even have to freeze our eggs. I'm just saying, I think we've got to just like recognize that with life expectancy, people's fitness levels and various other things, perhaps the system is kind of changing a little bit. And there might be some hope there. But quickly, something that I've been meaning to ask each one of you, how did your personal journeys with women's health just begin? So Brittany, let's go with you first.
I'm a geneticist by training, so DNA, XX chromosomes, XY chromosomes have always been part of my studies and my research. I actually was the founder of a DNA-based dating app that matched singles based on their pheromones. But did you know that if you're on hormonal birth control, it actually changes your pheromones and who you're attracted to? And so in our dating app, we actually had to ask women, are you on birth control or not? Because it literally inversed the algorithm. And so as I look back at all the other ventures I've done, I'm like, yeah, time and time again, women's health had a part in it, and not only a part, but like an interesting caveat to it, like where I thought to myself, wait, if our birth control is changing who we're attracted to, could that be correlated to divorce rate after we get off our birth control, right? So I just started to ask questions like that. And then I was a venture capitalist, and I met a founder who was inventing the first ever vaginal stint. So when you have radiation therapy for cervical cancer, there's a high risk of the vagina actually melting shut. And there is no such thing as a vaginal stint to maintain the integrity of the vaginal canal. And so she was inventing that. And that was the day that I decided I need to dedicate my life to women's health, because women's vaginas are literally melting shut. And that's apparently a medical, like, just fine, thing that happens. And I think that's unacceptable. And so that's really where I started my journey, started my podcast, and now we are a global consulting firm for women's health innovation.
Congratulations. Good on you. Love that. Great. Navneet, tell us about yours.
Yeah, so actually, my background is very, very different. I was heading a liquor business, was worked in very male-dominated industry, launched 5 brands alone, worked with the government across south side of India. It was great experience heading my team, but women health was very, very close to me, because especially fitness part. And I've always seen that, not like living in very diverse and culture household, and in India we don't really talk about our sexual health or our menstrual health and all that, right? So I've got very bad UTI infection, and I was traveling, and I was in US, and then I went through very horrible experience. And I think that's the first time the doctor told me to get my STI test done, and which was quite scary, because you know um we don't know, we never talk about in India, like we talk about, hey, let's get a fitness test, get your vitamins test done, but what about your STI test? No. And my mom actually told me to get it done, and I just felt very offended. I felt really bad, because I was also too young to sort of understand that, and right. And then I think it started from there. Like I was into fitness, and I just got to know about what femtech is. It was in back of my mind, and then got into my family business, did everything. And then I was like, this is the time now that I wanted to get into women's health. Of course, I don't have healthcare background, but I felt I have the passion to do it, and I can build my resources around. Honestly, I did my research for almost 1 year, really putting everything together to understand what femtech is, how is the landscape in India and overall, and really connected with amazing people. They supported me, like, go for it. And I think now we have a 50 plus companies on board. We are 6 months old platform. We have a weekly newsletter which is especially dedicated on women's health, uh, especially on like what's happening in Indian femtech ecosystem, because really wanted to empower that, because femtech is really sounds as a global thing, and I think India needs that. And I think I've done, every time I go and sit in some cafe, I talk to girls to know, I ask them this questions: have you ever done this test? Have you, like, what do you know about femtech? And not many
Yeah.
women know that. And I feel we're doing, it's great, because 10 out of only 2 women know what femtech is. And I think even if I'm meeting those 10 women and we telling them what femtech is, like, we empowering the overall space, they're getting aware, right? So
Yeah.
that's how just I got into, and we're really looking forward to really focus on empowering Indian ecosystem as well, having global partners. I have a podcast as well, which is again focused on women's health, bring very different experts on board, having real conversations about women's health. So the idea is to, any woman, even who's sitting in smaller village, she wants to learn about women's health, she can have access to those resources, which is our newsletter, our blog, and our content, whatever
Sure.
we are doing. And also sort of trying to empower, we're starting workshops now which can really help femtech startups and people who wants to get into femtech industry overall.
To understand. Fantastic. I love one thing that you said, that, sometimes you judge yourself, right? And I guess that's one of the things around women's health that's so hard to break, because, you can't change it from the outside. It has to come from the inside.
That's
Final
true.
comments from you, Shailja, for your
So
experience.
yeah, my actually femtech journey, female health journey, I would say, it started from my first startup, which was around women. I started a women-driven cab service, and that is where I got to understand the story of women at the level, like at the underprivileged strata level, where women are actually facing those sexual health issues, and from their partners or within themselves. That was the first, I would say, exposure for me to understand the female health so closely. And after my first startup, when there was an incident in my close family around sexual health, which made me understand that sexual health is such an underrated topic in India. It needs to come out. People need to talk more about it. There has to be a platform where people can understand and can get their sexual issues treated, which is actually causing so much chaos, which is I call it the longest running pandemic because it hasn't ended yet, the sexual health concerns, and nobody is actually working on it. So there I understood when I was researching on sexual health that whether it is a sexual health concern of men or women, of course, it affects women's health drastically. Mental health as well as physical health. Mental health because if they're not having kids because of sexual health concerns, still in our culture and in Indian societies mostly, women are, considered that, okay, you are not able to conceive. Even if it is a problem, a sexual health concern with men, still women are considered that you are not able to conceive. If it is a problem with women, a sexual health concern, she is again, she keeps doubting herself. She's thinking that, okay, because of me, my partner is not happy in our relationship. I am having a sexual health concern. My partner is not happy. So at the end, woman is actually getting, I would say sandwiched, and it's getting affected in every case. So that is where I think I took a step that, okay, sexual health needs to be solved for both men and women, but yes, women need to be made aware first that, okay, you are not at fault at every step. So please take care of yourself.
I know. I really wish more and more women would listen to this and implement it. It's such a hard one, honestly. But it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with all of you, and I hope to stay in touch. And we're all on the same mission. And that's what I love about this whole sisterhood in any space, right? We are not here to compete. We're all here to build. And I use the term "we" very broadly to everyone who's trying to work in this space because, just look at India, 750 million women. That's like a tenth of the world's population. And we
That's
still don't
true.
think of ourselves as a force. We think of ourselves as a number. We could change that. And all of you are part of that. So I think I'd like to congratulate each one of you for what you're doing. And thanks for being with us here at Femtech Next. And look forward to staying in touch and doing this together. Thanks.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thanks. Have a great
Bye.
evening ahead. Bye.